Hello guys, in this video we are going to discuss the solution of the problem smallest positive missing number. So let us look at the problem statement. The problem statement says you are given an integer array ARR. Your task is to find the smallest positive number missing from the array. Note, positive number starts from 1. The array can have negative integers too. So for instance, if this is the array which is given to us, the smallest positive number which is missing from here is 3, and that is why we are returning 3 over here. So that's about the problem statement, folks. Now let us discuss the solution of this problem. So the general idea behind solving this problem is, first we are going to iterate through the elements of the array, and with the first iteration we are going to check whether 1 exists in the array or not. If 1 does not exist in the array, then 1 is the smallest positive missing integer and we are going to return 1 in such case. Also, while iterating the elements of the array, we are also going to check whether the current element is less than 1 or it is greater than the size of the array. If so, then we are going to set that particular value equals to 1, since these values are exceeding the boundaries of the array. And after doing so, again we are going to iterate on the elements of the array, and the first thing which we are going to do is we are going to take an idx which is equals to absolute array I. Please note folks, this idx indicates that idx element or this integer exists in the array. Now since this idx exists in the array, then we are going to mark its presence, indicating that idx is present in the array. And the way we are going to mark its presence is essentially what we are going to do is we are going to say idx minus 1 equals to minus into arr idx minus 1, an absolute of this value. This indicates that if an idx is present in the array or if an integer is present in the array, then the corresponding value will be set to negative. And finally, we are going to iterate on the array and check if arri is greater than 0. Since we have marked all the elements which are present in the array as negative, if arri is greater than 0, then that simply means I plus 1 is the missing integer and we are going to return I plus 1. And let us say if all the elements of the array are set to negative or is less than 0, then in such case the missing element will be given by length of array plus 1. So that's the brief idea about the solution of this problem, folks. Now let us take an example to understand this. So let us say this is the array which is given to us. So the first thing which we are going to do is we are going to iterate through the elements of the array and we are going to check whether 1 exists in the array. And at the same time we are also going to check whether arri is less than 0 or arri is greater than the size of the array. If this is the case, then we are going to set those values equals to 1. So let us do that. Since the first element 2 is within the range of the array, so we are going to mark it as 2 itself. Since this value is less than 0, because of which we are going to set it to 1. Again 4 is within the range of the array, so we are going to mark it as such. And since 1 exists in the array, so we will have a flag with us and we are going to set this flag value to true because 1 exists in the array. Again 1 exists in the array, so the flag is already set to true. And since 7 is outside the range of the array, because of which we are going to again mark it as 1. And in this way, through the first iteration of the elements of the array, we will manipulate the elements of the array in this fashion. After doing so, we are going to mark the presence of each of the elements of the array in the index itself. After step 1, we know that all the elements which are present in the array are within the range of the array. So, all the elements are within the range of the array. It simply means if you look at any element of this array that is less than, so over here arri is greater than 0 and it is less than length of array. Now in the next iteration, what we are going to do is we are going to iterate on the elements of the array and we are going to mark its presence by turning that element to negative. So what do I mean by this is, let us say this 2. So as you can see, idx is equals to absolute of arri. So over here my idx is equals to 2. Now since this 2 exists in the array, so we are going to mark the presence of 2 in the array, and the way we are going to do that is we are going to look for the first element. So 2 minus 1, idx minus 1, and we are going to turn this value to minus. So this becomes minus 1. This negative value indicates that I plus 1 exists in the array. So this is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 exists in the array will be indicated by this. Now let us proceed forward. Now this value is equals to minus 1. So the first thing which we are going to do is we are going to take the absolute of this value. So this value becomes equals to 1. Now since 1 exists in the array, because of which we are going to mark its presence in the array, and the way we are going to do is idx minus 1, so this becomes 0, and this value we are going to turn it to negative. Now the next value is 4, so idx becomes equals to 4, and 4 minus 1 is equals to 3. So this value we are going to turn it to negative, indicating that 4 exists in the array. So this value becomes minus 1. Now the next element is minus 1, so again we are going to take the absolute of this value, so this becomes 1, and 1 minus 1 is 0, so this is at this position. So again we are going to turn this value to negative. So folks, the way we are turning the value back to negative, if you see, is essentially minus 1 into absolute of ARR IDX minus 1. So essentially this is minus 1 into absolute of minus 2. So this essentially becomes equals to minus 2, and this value remains minus 2. So in a sense, what I was trying to emphasize over here is, if a value is already negative, then by turning the value again back to negative, it does not become positive. So again, this value remains minus 2, and the same goes for this. And in this way, we will be able to mark the presence of each of the elements which are present in the array. Now finally, we are going to iterate through the elements of the array one more time, and we are going to check whether a particular element is positive or not. So since this element is positive, now since this element is negative, so we know that this element exists in the array. So 0, and which element does it corresponds to? 0 plus 1. So this index is what we are looking at. Again, this element is also negative, so we know that 2 exists in our array. Now this is a positive integer. Since this is a positive integer, this simply means that this index does not exist in the array, and the index we are looking at is 2. So the answer will be 2 plus 1, which is equals to 3. So 3 is the missing positive integer, and this is what we are going to return. So that's the discussion of solution, folks. Now let us discuss the pseudocode of this problem. So let us say we want to find a missing number and an array is given to us. So for that, let's take flag and let's set this value to false, which simply means 1 does not exist in the array. And also let's take n, which is equals to length of array. And then we are going to iterate on the elements of the array, and we are going to check whether 1 exists in the array or not. So for that, for I in range of ARR, and we are going to check whether ARR I equals to 1. If it is equals to 1, then that simply means 1 exists in the array, and we are going to set flag equals to true. At the same time, we are also going to check if ARRI is less than 1 or ARRI is greater than n. If this is the case, then the elements are going beyond the range of the array, and we are going to set ARRI equals to 1. And with this loop, we realize whether 1 exists in the array or not. If 1 does not exist in the array, then in such case, the smallest positive integer is 1, which is missing, and because of which we are going to return 1. Otherwise, we are going to iterate on the array again. So for I in a range of n. And then we are going to mark the presence of the elements of the array. So for that, idx is equals to absolute of ARRI. Now let us mark the presence of idx in the array. So for that, ARR idx minus 1. So idx presence will be marked at the index idx minus 1. Since idx exists, because of which this particular value will be set to negative. So minus 1 into absolute of ARR idx minus 1. And in this way, we will be able to mark the presence of the element. And finally, we are going to check if ARRI is greater than 0. If ARRI is greater than 0, then that simply means I plus 1 is the smallest positive integer which is missing, because of which we are going to return I plus 1. Since by marking the presence we have turned all the elements to negative. And let us say if this condition is not satisfied, in such case we are going to return n plus 1. So that's the pseudocode, folks. Now let us see how we have implemented this in Python and C++. So first let us look at the Python implementation. So flag equals to false, n is equals to length of array, and with the first loop we checked whether 1 exists in the array or not. And at the same time we have marked arri equals to 1 if arri is less than 1 or it is greater than n. If 1 does not exist in the array, then we are returning 1. Otherwise, we are again iterating on the elements of the array and we are marking the presence of an element by marking that value as negative. And then finally we are iterating on the elements of the array and we are checking whether arri is greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, then this is the missing number and we are returning I plus 1. Otherwise, we are returning n plus 1. So that's the Python implementation, folks. Now let us submit our solution. So our Python solution got accepted. Now let us look at the C++ implementation. So the C++ implementation is also the same, folks. Flag equals to false, n equals to size of the array. Then we are iterating on the elements of the array and we are checking whether 1 exists in the array or not. If 1 exists in the array, we are setting flag equals to true. And at the same time, we are marking arri equals to 1 if arri is less than 1 or arri is greater than n. If 1 does not exist in the array, then we are returning 1. Otherwise, we are iterating on the elements of the array and we are marking its presence in the array itself. Finally, we are again iterating on the elements of the array, and if a particular element is greater than 0, then we are returning I plus 1. If this condition is not satisfied, then we are returning n plus 1. So that's the C++ implementation, folks. Now let us submit our solution. So our C++ implementation also got accepted. That is all from this video, folks. In case if you have any question or comment regarding this video, please feel free to use the comment section and I'll try to address them. Thank you.